Hey friends, just a quick reminder before we jump into today's episode that the Nugget is now on YouTube. We have picked some of our favorite moments from the podcast and turned them into 4 to 8 minute long videos. Now you can see some of the best clips from the podcast with never before seen content. I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to be super cool. It seems like you guys are already loving the Nugget on YouTube. Since we just launched at the beginning of February, for the month of February, we are doing a raffle with some of my favorite brands who support the podcast. And we're giving away a free training bundle worth more than $300. All you have to do is subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's it. It's super easy. There's no catch. You will automatically be entered to win a free training bundle. That includes a free kilo of chalk and a brush and a taco skin sander from Chalk Cartel, a free hangboard from Frictitious Climbing, and you'll win some of my favorite skincare products from Rhino Skin Solutions to keep your skin in tip-top shape for your training and rock climbing. Once again, all you have to do to enter the raffle is subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's that simple. It's free. It'll take you 10 seconds. You can do it right now. Just scroll down right there in your podcast app, and you can find a link that will take you over to YouTube and tap that subscribe button. Or you can go to youtube.com/@thenuggetclimbing. Make sure you include that @ symbol. The deadline is February 28th, so 9 more days, including today. But do it now while you've got your phone handy and while you're thinking about it. All right, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy today's episode. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. I started taking Athletic Greens. When did I start taking Athletic Greens? About 1.5 years ago. I love it. I've been taking it ever since. I sip on it first thing in the morning while I make my coffee. It has become one of my favorite parts of my morning routine. As all of you know, I prioritize eating whole foods when it comes to my nutrition. I really feel better when I eat quality food. But when you live on the road, getting high quality food can be tough, especially in remote climbing areas. One scoop of Athletic Greens has 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. I think of it as all-in-one nutritional insurance. If I take Athletic Greens in the morning, I know I'm covered, and I love that. To make your decision easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you, my dear listener, a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/nugget. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/nugget to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. This episode is brought to you by Grasshopper Climbing. I have had a lot of great conversations lately on the podcast, and one thing that keeps coming up again and again when it comes to getting better at climbing is consistency. It's that simple. There's no magic hangboard program or bouldering routine that's going to get you super duper strong in just a few weeks. The key to making lasting gains in your strength and your climbing technique is consistency. Just climbing or training regularly for years and years. But consistency is hard. If you have kids, or you live in a city, or you work a 9-to-5 job, or all of the above, you only have evenings free to train, and you have to compete with crowds at the gym, it can be really hard to stick to a consistent schedule. Luckily, the folks at Grasshopper Climbing designed the perfect solution. The Grasshopper board was designed to give you an entire climbing gym experience right in your home. And the best part, they did such a good job with the hold shaping and layout that the Grasshopper board will be right for you whether you are a beginner or you climb V15. It's so efficient. It's so good for training. Most importantly, it's so much fun to climb on. But don't take my word for it, because the folks at Grasshopper, they just want you to try it out and see for yourself. So if you want to learn more, head over to grasshopperclimbing.com or check them out on Instagram at grasshopperclimbing. Check out their boards and reach out to their sales team to see which board solution is right for you. And be sure to tell them that you heard about the Grasshopper board from the Nugget Climbing podcast, because the folks at Grasshopper are offering you guys, my dear listeners, $500 off when you order a fully kitted out 8x10 foot Grasshopper board. $500 or even more if you upgrade to a larger board. Again, that is grasshopperclimbing.com to check out the Grasshopper board. And finally, this episode is brought to you by PhysiVantage, the official climbing nutrition sponsor of the Nugget Climbing Podcast. PhysiVantage is the leading brand in climbing nutrition, with more than 40 professional climbers now using PhysiVantage products daily to support their training and climbing performance. Many of those names are people I have had on this show, and there's a reason why they're all taking PhysiVantage. Visit PhysiVantage.com to learn more about their many innovative research-based nutrition products and supplements, including their revolutionary supercharged collagen. I love this stuff. It's really hard to get enough collagen or the ideal amount of collagen in your diet. And if you're a climber, you probably need more than the average person. I just recovered from an injury. I partially tore my bicep tendon back in December, and collagen has been super, super helpful in my recovery process. My PT has been really surprised at how quickly I've made progress, and I think sticking to a good PT routine plus collagen has been incredibly helpful. I think that's been the recipe. Anyway, supercharged collagen, I love it. They also have the performance-boosting EndureX and their delicious protein supplements, weapons-grade whey, and the plant-based Powerplex. If you would like to feel the PhysiVantage, head over to PhysiVantage.com and use code NUGGET15 at checkout to save 15% off any full-priced nutrition product. That's NUGGET15 at checkout, or you can use the direct link to this coupon right there in your podcast app. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Nugget Climbing Podcast. This is your host, Stephen Dimmitt, and my guest today is Jeannie Wall. Jeannie co-founded a company called Broad Beta with her friend Leslie Gaines Germain, with the goal of cultivating a community for women and genderqueer folk to openly and honestly share their stories of outdoor adventure in the mountains, including helpful gear, food and tactical tips, and the emotional and physical challenges unique to women and genderqueer climbers, backcountry skiers, and other outdoor activists. I'm reading this off of the Broad Beta website because it's awesome, and I'm going to go ahead and read Jeannie's bio from the website as well. Jeannie Wall is a world-class skier and has been an ultra runner for decades. Currently, she is obsessed with climbing in all of its forms, which is why she's here on the podcast. In her early 50s, she began to realize some of her biggest dreams, like climbing Fitz Roy in Patagonia and the nose on El Capitan in Yosemite with great women partners, and she still loves to backcountry ski. And now she has taken some of her passion and focus into actively caring about the world and inspiring women to be their true selves. And that is a lot of what we talked about in our episode today. We talked about all those things. It was super fun to get to know Jeannie. One of her nicknames is the Energizer Bunny. She comes from a background of Nordic racing and ski mountaineering and has transitioned to more rock climbing. And one of her challenges is slowing down and resting in the name of climbing harder. And that was something that we talked about in this episode as well. Anyway, I really enjoyed this episode with Jeannie. And without further ado, here she is, and I hope you enjoy. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. I want to start by outlining what I have in mind for the conversation, and then, I kind of have but first we need to talk about this topic. So just to give people an idea of what I'm excited to talk to you about today, I'm so glad that you're here. I think of you as primarily as a mountain endurance athlete. I don't know if that's how you would describe your background, but I think it'd be really interesting to hear at least some of that story and your background as an athlete and your love for the mountains. I think it'd be interesting to talk about how you eventually transitioned into more rock climbing and what lessons you've been able to bring with you from all your years of Nordic skiing and ski mountaineering and ultra running and things like that. And then I think we'll make our way towards mentorship and all the things that you're doing with Broad Beta. So that's kind of what I have in mind for a rough outline. But first, the youngest of 11 children. Is that true? Are you the youngest of 11 children? I just learned that, or was reminded of that this morning listening to Leslie's interview on your podcast. And I have so many questions, but yeah. Am I getting that fact right?
Yes, I'm a recovering Catholic.
It's a great way to
The
put it.
the youngest of basically post World War II baby boom family that was, good Irish Catholics, and my parents were probably either going to go into convents or monasteries or have as many kids as they possibly could.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm actually Gen X, not baby boom, but the rest of my family probably fits into that. So yeah, it was kind of survival of the fittest in my family. It was a little bit of chaos
I
for a while.
imagine it was. I have so many questions, like I said, and the first most tempting question I think I'm not going to ask because I think it's a really bad question. But when I learned that, I immediately wanted to know what was that like. Like that's just so different from my upbringing and so interesting to me. But I actually just listened to a different podcast the other day, and the host asked a very similar question to someone who came from a large family, and they were like, "Look, I mean, it's just normal. If that's what you grew up with, however you grow up is normal to you, you know?" So it wasn't really that interesting of a question. So I want to ask you this. When was the first time that you realized that your upbringing was different from most people? Did you have a moment where that kind of clicked for you?
Well, I think it hit me hardest when I had a very close, call it my best friend in college, who I moved into an apartment with, I think sophomore year. And she, we got along famously. She worked at the climbing shop that I did. And we decided, well, let's try to be roommates for a year in college. She was an only child. And moving in with her, I started to reflect on all of these behaviors in myself that I recognized as just being innate because of growing up in this large family, and a large family that wasn't touchy feely, right? It was really survival to a degree. And she grew up in this environment as an only child where she never had to worry about hiding the cereal box when her mom got home from the grocery store. She'd never get her favorite cereal. She never worried about like getting enough food off the table or having opportunities or, which hand-me-downs she didn't want to get that, she'd rather be able to buy or whatever. So, but also so it became tense in some ways, because we really related to the world differently.
Mm.
And we sorted it out, but we went through some rough moments. And I think in hindsight, I learned later what baggage I carried with me from growing up in a large family and what benefits I carried with me. And to this day, I still work on the baggage.
Of course, yeah.
But there were a lot of benefits too. And there still are. Obviously, I have tons of siblings helping with my mother, who's still alive. And I know I can turn to them even if they're dysfunctional or I'm dysfunctional or, we don't get along perfectly. So it was very interesting though. It's sort of like you said, you just think, oh, that's just the way it is. And it's a little akin to what's going on today, I think, with all of the things that we went through during COVID that have awakened us to a lot of the issues that we need to deal with better in this society, which is we look at the world through our lens and we think that's just how it is. That's reality. And of course, today it's like, no, that's not necessarily reality,
Right.
or what reality should be, right?
Right.
And even today I'm working on not, gosh, actually, I want to see the world through a different lens so that I have more empathy or more compassion but yeah, it's really different because you're just used to all this feedback when you're in a big family, right? Constant feedback. You don't really want it. And then you
Can't
start giving
it. Oh, funny.
Yeah.
Of course. Dishing it right back. Would you be willing to share examples of baggage and benefits, one or two of each that come to mind or that were big realizations for you later in life?
Yeah, benefit wise, it's like I said, just having siblings. Like I know people who are only children or just have one sibling. When anything goes wrong in your family, it's like, whoa, you're it, right? You have to be there. You take on this huge burden. if your parents get sick, or you have no, or worse, you have no one to turn to, right? You're just alone in the world. And I don't know what that's like. As much as I don't get along with some of my siblings, or do get along, but we're really different. Most of my family's still kind of conservative Midwest folks, but not all of them. I still am really grateful they're there. We all would be there for each other.
Hmm.
So that's kind of huge, right? I'd say the baggage is we grew up, my parents they probably should never have gotten married. They would both admit that today, And so I grew up with a lot of friction and tension in my family, and that trickled down to all of us. And so we grew up really competitive with each other, or just competitive for their love, or competitive for resources that we didn't have, which I think I came out of the womb pretty much someone who was going to be an athlete. But at the same time, I think that competitiveness in my family probably contributed to the pros and cons of who I became as an athlete. So, I learned early that I had to survive on my own, that I needed to kind of figure out the world and take care of myself and be strong, et cetera, et cetera. And that was also driven into us by a pretty controlling father who wanted us to be independent. But so, yeah, that was the pros, so I'm still battling being competitive. I don't want to be competitive with my friends, especially in a climbing situation more than anything. But when I was racing as an endurance athlete, Nordic racing, running, biking, whatever, it was hugely helpful. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
I had that dogged determination to just I wanted to win. I wanted to go as hard as I could.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to dig into that a little bit more deeply and just hear if that's something that you miss these days. I don't actually know if that's still a part of your life, if you're still doing any sort of racing or competing. But I want to kind of work our way there from this question. How would you describe the chapter of life you're in now? What feels important to you, or what are you focused on right now in your life?
The quick answer would be trying to give back more than take from the world. But that sounds so cliche and like I'm just trying to be this good person. I mean, I'm still taking plenty, and we can all relate to that as climbers. As we know, it's a really personal thing. But also it's a chance for me in this time to, like I said, look at the world through a different lens and be more reflective and more compassionate. And for me, the biggest thing I never learned growing up in that family was patience. And I'm an incredibly impatient person, as all my friends would attest to. And, as much as I try, it's still really hard for me. But yeah, I mean, I think in 30 years in the outdoor industry, working in all of that time in sports and endurance and climbing, it's really challenging still for me to take the time and want to help other people experience things that people took time to help me with, right? I mean, I remember some of those firsts of like someone taking me out in the backcountry skiing or climbing multi-pitch or whatever. But I think broad beta is that for me right now is a chance to really sort of open my eyes to all of the different needs out there for women and genderqueer and those of us on the margins, and how we've evolved, but how we're still evolving, and how much room there is to still support each other and change our culture, because there's still a lot of change that's needed. So that's a bit roundabout, but
yeah. No, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious if you missed the competition part of things. You and I, we talked in November. We had a nice long conversation and got to know each other better. And you told me, I don't know if we have enough time here today to kind of share your whole athletic history. We certainly can talk about it. But you told me this gripping story about being a Nordic ski racer and missing the Olympic team by one spot. and some of the lessons you learned from that, the ski politics involved in racing and shifting to randonnée racing. And does that still hold a place for you in your life? Are you still a competitor? Do you miss being a competitor? What does that look like for you these days?
No. A really easy answer.
Long question, short answer. Great.
No.
No, you're not doing it. No, you don't miss it. But like no to both of those. Okay.
All of the above.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is that Olympic trials was in Anchorage. I was 26. I'd done 5 races in my life, Nordic. I had no opportunities to be on a team or be coached or anything else. I was just working in a ski shop and friends, I got psyched to try skate skiing and got into it and jumped in a few races, and getting to the trials is easy. They take anyone. But I'll never forget, like I was running around this Nordic track, racing, freezing cold in Anchorage, Kincaid Park. It's right on the ocean. And I was looking up at Denali and I was like, what am I doing down here? I mean, I hadn't even done any alpine climbing yet. It was quick to come into my life after that. But even then I was like, I should be up there. Right. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have the opportunities yet. And even though I didn't have a lot of opportunities in Nordic, in those trials races, I somehow got lucky. I took a couple of 6th place finishes. There was an article in the paper because no one knew who I was. And I was like 9th at the end of the trials, and they took eight women on the team. And it wasn't like I deserved to go. God, I hadn't put in my time. Like many of those women had been racing since they were 5 or something, I kind of got lucky, but then I was really quickly awakened to the politics, because just through the grapevine, the message to me was, you're already too old to train. Here I was, I'd done 5 races, I almost make the team. And the US team is like, nope, sorry, we're not interested in you. You're not one of us, right? You're too old.
At 26.
Yeah, thank God today they've finally freaking woken up a little bit to the fact that women are fastest in endurance when they're in their late 20s, early 30s. And those are the women, getting us medals in the Olympics now, right? But no, I have no desire to compete. It's interesting. I mean, that's all I wanted to do when I had so much energy before, but it took me forever for climbing to take hold. You and I chatted about this. It's like, I always loved it, but I think I was just always scared of the falling, or I don't know, putting myself out there. And I never understood how to put myself into climbing in a way that I felt totally exhausted. Like, that's so easy to do when you go out on your Nordic skis, or what I call the misery sticks now.
The misery sticks. That's amazing.
Or if I go out ski touring, which I do a lot of still, it's so easy to exhaust myself. But I didn't understand how that pushing my limit in climbing, if I climbed something hard enough, or if I'd actually known about projecting or anything else like that, I would have felt more fulfilled and it would have grabbed me earlier. Mm. So I loved it, but I'd go climb and then I'd go for a run, or I'd climb and I'd go for a ski, or it wasn't enough, because I didn't find a place to push hard enough with it.
Right. Right.
So no, I have no desire to compete now. I just wish I'd found the fulfillment I find now in climbing years earlier, and quit racing earlier, because there's so many places I want to go, and so many partners I want to climb with, and experiences I want to have with climbing, that at my age, I still have time, but physically, obviously, it's not going to be a lot longer left when I feel like I can actually get stronger.
How old are you? You're 54, is that right?
5.
55. Okay. 5.
It's kind of hard to believe, honestly, because I mean, mostly now I spend my time with younger climbing partners, and have plenty of friends my age, but they're not necessarily climbers as much. And so I don't really think about it, and you hit 50 as a woman, and it's true. You do. I wrote about this in that menopause and climbing article, you do kind of become invisible, but it's a gift because if you just stop looking in the mirror, you also just sort of forget, and then you don't really care what people think anymore. And when you asked where I'm at in this stage of life, it's letting go of all of that energy that I put into how I looked or my body composition or all of that stuff as women that we kind of more often put energy into. That's such a waste. It's such a gift to try to let go of that and just go, whoa, this is what I've got, use it and share it and live it and enjoy the experiences of it and forget about all the aesthetic stuff that tortures us as, I think, more as women probably, but not we're not alone in that for sure.
Right. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. And I mean, it's interesting. I'm 33 and I feel like, the last decade of my life has just flown by. So I have to imagine that, reaching my mid 50s, it's going to happen in a blink, and I'll look back at it like, how the hell did that happen? So I can already, kind of relate to that sentiment. At the same time, you might have a lot more time than you think. I'm hanging out here in Waco with Chuck and Maggie Odette. I think Chuck is like 67, and I could be wrong about this. I'll need to fact check myself, but I think he's done all of his hardest routes in his 60s, and he's still pushing up against some of his hardest that he's ever done, and trying some, projects in Maple that he's had forever and things like that. So, and he's just out there, like they're living in a camper, and I see them doing yoga on rest days out on their little mat, and Chuck's doing his like taekwondo or whatever that he does, and super fit, still sharp as a tack, getting after it here in Waco, bouldering. And I'm just like, I would be so happy if I was still doing this at 67. It's so cool.
For sure. Yeah. Me too. And there are lots of amazing examples and such great inspiration out there and information, right?
Right.
Now we have so much more information of how to take care of ourselves. And I mean, that's the ideal, is that you still have your health. You worked through the crazy surgeries. I had 4 in a row at age 40, 3 shoulders and a knee. And
man.
And then you learn what to do with PT and yoga and your diet. And then it's kind of like, okay, if I can just kind of be careful. My biggest crux is taking enough rest days, which I'm not very good. This is great because I'm completely torched, so happy just to sit down today.
That's good. That's good timing. What did you do yesterday or in the days leading up to this?
I was on this ski hut trip, and I in fact, I'm with a bunch of friends my age, and they're all kind of crushers. They love to go out for 8 hours a day, and we tour, 7,000, 8,000 feet a day. And
wow.
Drove 12 hours home and went out on these mixed climbs and just thrashed myself 3 days in a row because, of course, I was like, I need to go climbing. And now I can barely move.
Nice. It's good for me. Good for me. I'll get at least an hour out of you before you feel antsy and have to go do something. I am curious to hear what finally captured you as far as climbing goes, because your story makes a lot of sense. Like, you talk about growing up and struggling with patience. And of course, especially nowadays, we see so many stories of ways to have the type of experience in climbing that you sought out in Nordic and these other mountain sports, like doing big enchainments and climbing, and, how much can you climb in 24 hours? That's like the new game that everyone's playing. And I don't know if maybe that wasn't on your radar as much 20 years ago. It certainly wasn't on mine. So maybe that's why it took time to see yourself in climbing. What was it that finally captured you? I have a note in front of me. I wonder if this ties in. It just, I wrote myself a very cryptic note. It says injuries, and then there's an arrow to the right, and then it says rehab, and then an arrow to the right, and it says strength training, and then an arrow to the right, and it says rock climbing. It's like, that's your path. Is that how you got into rock climbing? Was it through a series of injuries?
No. I mean, I learned to rock climb when I was like 17 or 16, the first day out in Devil's Lake when I was working at a ski and climbing shop. No, I always dabbled in it. I always liked it. So a couple things. None of those events were happening when I was full of all my endurance energy, right? But still liked climbing. I think if they had been out there, I might have found them instead of some of the endurance racing that I went after.
You mean like the in a day stuff, the enchainments, stuff like that,
The
link ups?
all that stuff, right? I think of that and I'm like, yeah, that would have been so cool. Because once I left Nordic and went to randonnée skimo racing, I was like, oh my God, why did I waste so much time in Nordic? Like, this is so much more exciting. You know, I get to actually be in the mountains and ski down crazy couloirs and boot up these ridges as part of a race. You know, so it's just a controlled enchainment type thing.
Skimo is ski mountaineering for people listening, in case you don't know that abbreviation. I had to look that up, which I'm embarrassed to say, but after I talked to you the first time, I was like, skimo, and then a quick Google, and I was like, oh my gosh, facepalm.
Well, we used to just call it randonnée racing, and then all of a sudden it becomes ski mountaineering racing, and then it's skimo racing. I know, it's funny. No, I think that might have happened, but still, I think the climbing that I now feel more fulfilled with is the, you know, not projecting per se, but the puzzling out of a harder route and actually, you know, there's routes here I've looked at my whole life and never thought I could do. And, you know, mixed climbs in highlight. And I'm finally looking at them like, yeah, of course I can do that. You know, and it's
mixed is in ice, dry tooling. That's sort of mixed. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're just harder things that I never had the mental kind of confidence more than physical to actually launch on and try. And then, you know, realizing that you don't have to get something the first or second try for it to be worthy of your attempts, right? I mean, if you can make a million tries. All that said, I do want to add, I find it so challenging in my head to look at where climbing has gone in terms of the speed stuff. Because for me, I look at that having come from all of this endurance background, right? And I'm like, go find a race, you know, a sort of a controlled environment with a finish line to go do that in. Instead of all of this Strava, like I feel bad for people in this position a little bit because it's like there's no finish line in climbing comps, right? So everybody who loves climbing, who like me at a certain age has all this energy and you know, maybe more talent and wants to push themselves, has to create the game, has to create the competition.
Right, like the speed record on the nose or the speed record on whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the 24-hour thing at least has a kind of a finish line, right? So there is sort of an end game to that. But they have to kind of create that to get all that energy out. Like I did it in a competitive fixed format. And in a way I look back and I'm kind of grateful because now climbing for me is not competitive. And it's such a bigger thing for all of us, I think, well, climbing can be such a bigger thing in terms of its cultural, its community, its partnerships, its wilderness experiences, its spiritual experiences, right? If we're into the alpine or alpine rock or not just this sort of sport indoor side of it, which nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. It's just I consider that kind of like what you love to do, bouldering, sort of a different sport. Because, you know, it's just not my realm. But I'm just grateful for me that I look back and I think, gosh, that would have been really fun. And then I look back and I go, oh, maybe I'm actually really grateful that I did it. I got that energy out in fixed.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. And now climbing for me isn't competitive. And I don't worry about, I don't even look at those things and even get excited about them. Like I have no desire to go out and try to do really fast stuff in that sense. Like if I would go alpine climbing, I want to be fast and effective and safe. Speed is safety, but not speed for speed's sake. Right?
Got it.
I don't have. None of my goals are related to doing something faster than anyone else.
Gotcha.
That's already been done. It's more just the quality of the climbing or the climb or the pursuit. For me at this stage, I will say, going back to what you said, injury wise, yes, I think I had those 4 surgeries, and then I also got swine flu, which a lot of folks don't remember, was a virus they thought would go viral the way COVID did. And it hit folks in their 40s, because the stronger your immune system was, the more it was apt to flip and attack itself. And so the people who died from swine flu were actually my age group in their 40s at the time. They were the ones in the ICUs who died, and it didn't go crazy, right? But those of us who got it and got it pretty badly, I ended up with 2 years of chronic fatigue. I mean, I remember skinning uphill afterward, thinking I was over it. Like, oh, it's just a flu. I'm just tired. I'm better. Although, so I'd be skinning uphill and literally want to just like pull off and take a nap. I could barely walk uphill. And when it hit me, I couldn't even get off the floor.
Oh man.
It was really bad. And so I think it damaged my lower lungs. I went through a whole host of tests for 2 years trying to figure out how to get over the chronic fatigue part of it. And in a small way, maybe that was the gift that got me into finding a different path in climbing. Because I was like, I'm done with racing. I'm done with even having the feeling that I want to go super hard, because it's probably not there anymore. Like I can still go pretty hard, but I can't go race hard probably anymore.
Yeah.
And so that probably at 45, that was a real gift for me, because then it was like, I just want to climb. But I'm such a late, like all these friends I know who are in the 20s, they're all done climbing, doing endurance stuff. And I'm like, just feel like I just got started.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Nope.
Yeah, I just think that's so exciting for you. It seems like you're just starting to kind of explore, I don't know how to say it, this kind of deeper, slower side of climbing. And again, it makes perfect sense why it has taken you a long time to become interested in it, because, like the type of climbing that I love, projecting hard boulders and sport climbs and things like that, it's so slow and tedious. And I'm not the type of person that needs to get energy out all the time. Like it's very easy for me to sit and edit a podcast for 8 hours straight. I don't know why that is, but I'm much more of like I can lock into like a really tedious task and just kind of keep chipping away at it. So that style of climbing suits my personality. But yeah, I see climbers who are a little bit more like you, who just have, the Energizer bunnies. Like Amity Warm comes to mind, like she needs to be climbing on El Cap. She needs to be trying to do hard El Cap routes in a day, because she just goes, right? And she has a hard time turning that off. Not that she should. So I'm curious what your relationship with climbing looks like these days. And I actually want to share one of the more profound things that you said in our first conversation, which is, I have a little quote in front of me. If you want to go fast, you've got to go slow most of the time. I thought that was so great. That captures such an important principle, I think, of performance, whether it's in speed and racing or in hard climbing. But yeah, I'd love to hear you talk more about that and what climbing looks like for you nowadays.
So that's still the crux for me. For two reasons. I still have a lot of energy, and I still love to just be outside. So it's two things. It's hard for me to train the way I should if I really want to push my limit, like grade wise or just project wise. I don't want to give up those days outside. So the best example is, I came off a week of skiing, a 12-hour drive. I'm like, I should have taken a day off, right? And then I could have have actually spent a really perfect day in highlight up on Nutcracker working on the Crux pitch. But instead, I was so desperate to climb and to be outside again. I spent 3 days in a row sort of torching myself, but not getting anything done, right? I mean, other than just pure enjoyment of climbing in the canyon and pumping myself silly, right? But I didn't really work toward the goals that I have this winter. That week. Subsequently, it's interesting because I spent that week with my friend's daughter, who's 16, who's a ski mountaineering racer in Salt Lake, crushing it, and had these very conversations. And without trying to give her advice, I was asking her about her training, and she was just describing the same thing that, it's just like, I keep thinking we've learned, and then I hear about her coaches and they're overtraining her. More in mountain biking than in ski mountaineering. her woman ski mountaineering coach, I will say, sounds like awesome. Like if people say they're tired, she's like, all right, let's do something fun. But I was saying that very same thing to her. I was just like, so, my best races were when the week before I'd go out and do something super long, 5-8 hours, but so slow it was torturous. I could have a conversation the whole way. I wanted to pick up the speed. But same with climbing for me. That's my crutch, is that I don't take enough rest days to then try to really climb hard enough to get something that I'm looking at. I mean, occasionally I do, I'm learning, and it's really rewarding. But like you said, it's amazing how much like 3 boulder moves will take out of you.
Yeah.
Right? And then for me to like, so I'm willing to compromise a certain grade or a certain level in climbing that I probably could still get to. It's not that important to me. I'd rather, like, I would love to be pushing into more and more 12s that are trad and know that means that everywhere I go in the mountains, I could jump on hard 11 cracks I've never seen before. And, on big alpine rock climbs and feel confident, because that's my end goal. So I want to be out there doing that. Right. Mm-hmm. Even though the projecting is in our own canyon here, it's so fun and rewarding, especially the partnership part of it, just the support. But yeah, I just need to slow down enough and realize that, I need a lot more rest to do that kind of stuff. So I think it lends itself better to your, your physiology and personality, which is like, you're completely fine just doing a hard day of bouldering and then doing a couple of days of podcasting, right?
Right. Well, yeah.
But I gotta get outside every day.
Yeah, but I don't know. I also am very aware in this conversation that I'm probably playing into what I think has become kind of a weird climbing cultural issue, which is that we really elevate projecting. We really put that on a pedestal. We feature that in all the films. It's always that kind of hero's journey, right? Like someone takes on the hardest thing they've ever tried and they struggle and they fail and then they have to leave and then they don't know if they'll ever do it and then they come back and then they succeed or whatever the story is. That's such a common arc. And I think sometimes I have to be careful. I have to remind myself that not everyone wants to be a project climber, or not everyone cares enough about climbing harder to align their climbing lifestyle in a way that leads to that. And that's totally fine. Like that's what's amazing about climbing, is everyone can have their own experience. Climbing can look like so many different things, I guess. And I'm curious for you, you just touched on it a little bit. It sounds like there's a little bit of a tension there. Like you want to improve your climbing. You want to raise your climbing grades so that you can go do these long multi-pitch 512s in the mountains and things like that in the alpine. And you recognize that to do that, you're going to have to take more rest days, at least sometimes, in pursuit of harder climbing. But then, you describing those 3 days of mixed climbing and just how joyous it was, like, of course, like if that's where you find joy in climbing, you should be doing that. Does that feel like a tension that you're holding between those two things?
A little bit, for sure. I love that what you've touched on, which is what the media shows us, what the media encourages us to think is important, right? Or our own social media feeds kind of keep feeding us as important. I'll give you a quote I had on my desk for years, and I have it there because it's so not me, but because I feel like I'm jack of all trades, master of none. I'm a pretty decent athlete who can do a lot of different things, but I've never given myself over completely to one of them to really know what I could accomplish, right? Mm-hmm. Where I could take it. And Van Gogh had this quote. It was essentially, if you give yourself up and over to one thing, if you burn yourself up completely, essentially focusing on one thing, being really good at it, knowing it completely, that you'll have knowledge of all things, right? Because that last 10% for all of us is the hardest thing in the world to give. It's where you got to close all the other doors. You've got to give up all these other things, And when we see the people who've done that, whether it's music or art or athletics, climbing, it's brilliant. Like it's like, wow, that is, I commend them. you know? And some of this comes back to my age in that I also have to recognize as much as I want a part of that, like you were saying, like I beat myself up a little bit because I still think I have the potential to climb harder. But I am not willing to give up the rest of those experiences that fuel me so much. So like Leslie, our mutual friend, is in New Mexico and she's working on these cave routes and she's starting to send 13s. And, she and I are the ones who started Broad Beta. And I'm just like, oh God, she's going to be too strong for me. I'm not going to be able to go on trips with her, And she's like, no, that's just cave routes. Right. But it's so impressive. It's like, she's given herself to that and it shows what you can do. On the flip side, she comes up here to get back into ice climbing, which she hasn't had a lot of experience in. Right. And it's like kind of you have to step back a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like I realize every time winter comes, I think I'm just going to rock climb for the winter and I'm going to just know I'm going to get, I'm going to project, I'm going to just keep my rock going. And then literally like one day out in the canyon, ice climbing or a powder day. And I so love winter, Stephen. It's totally insane. Like it was 35 below and you're like, God, that was miserable up there. And I'm like, no, I kind of loved it. And my mom's like that. She's 96 and she's always like, oh, it's cloudy and miserable here. And I just love it.
Oh, that's great.
But so part of it is I have to accept who I am. I love being in the mountains. I love the connection with wildness. And that's a big part of what fuels me and brings me joy. And at the same time, I'm a very physical, athletic person who now, climbing is my main thing. But so I know what it feels like to go out and actually get a climb that I never thought I could get or work on it or project it. And it's really cool. Like COVID was the time that taught me that. And the fun of like having this, we like had this COVID clutch where we'd all go to the crag together because we were all super open about who'd been exposed or not. And it was just so fun. It's probably what you get down there. You just have these friends. You just get to go support each other on these boulder problems. And I mean, I wish I could have it all, right? I wish there was time to it all. It's just not.
Totally. Well, this is why I'm so interested in hearing your thoughts on this is I think it's such a common struggle that so many climbers can relate to. There's not enough time to do it all. And I'm sure to you, I seem like someone who's really focused and I'm just pursuing these these goals and bouldering and sport climbing. But in my own way, I struggle with the exact same thing, which is probably my greatest climbing superpower is capacity in a day. Like being able to climb. I can climb V7 all day and I love doing that. But every time I go do that, I've been doing that for years. I'm just teaching my body to be able to climb more V7s in a day. I want to climb V12 eventually, and I'm not really serving myself towards that goal. And I'm kind of always holding this inner tension between those two things because some of the most rewarding experiences I've had in climbing and by extension in my life have been times where I did buckle down, no, this one's really important to me. I'm going to set some of this other stuff aside and go all in on this, this climb I want to do and commit a month of my life to it or more or whatever it takes. And when that works out, I mean, not even just when it works out, but the process of that is so rewarding in and of itself. And I'm always, I just think we all tend to be our own worst enemies, and that's something I'm still working through all the time is like, well, I so enjoy just doing new movement, doing new climbs and getting to the top of things and having those experiences with friends and, checking the box and feeling like I, was quote, productive with my day of climbing. And it just feels like life's short, do I really want to spend a big chunk of it underneath this one boulder? The tension between that and there are these harder things that I would really love to do, and that's going to require me to set that aside. It's just constant, and it's always a struggle with the balance there. So it's fun to hear you share your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I have lots, but that kind of brought back around a couple things. One is it sort of leads to mentorship, right? Which I never had. But it's also this thing of, like you said, I can just do this. I'm having fun. I'm happy. And you, unless you have the experience you had once, or I'm starting to get, you wouldn't even know how fulfilling it could be, right? To close those doors and actually focus on a goal. Um, if, and I think if we had better mentors, or if I had them, like anything in life, right? If someone encourages you or shows you something you didn't think was possible for yourself, if you sort of need that door to open a little bit somehow, and it's helpful if someone can help open that for you and show you a path, or maybe even give you some guidance toward it, right? um, so I never really had that. I just went for everything on my own, but it meant that I never really put myself out there and closed the doors that I should have. I think I say should have, just because I think, like you said, the fulfillment of doing that is huge, and it's hard. It's so unrecognizable to us if we've never had it or never seen it or whatever. It's a little bit like I see all these women, friends, others, and it's changing. And this is what's so exciting with being part of Broad Beta and just opening myself up to this world, who will top rope forever and say they're completely content. Right? It's just like, no, I don't need to lead. I'm psyched. I'm having a good time. I'm not really that into climbing, or it just would take too much to step back and start leading. It's like, how do you convey to them, right? This is where maybe mentorship can be a part of this world, to open people's eyes. But like, how do you convey to them? No, like, you don't understand. Like, if you start leading, like, it's not just about leading. It's like your whole life changes. Like, and it's just like anything else in your life. As soon as you find confidence in something you didn't have confidence in, right? It extends to the rest of your life, and how you feel about yourself and what you're going to do with your life and how you present yourself in work situations or life situations. And let alone just that moment of complete, like, craziness that you just did something you never thought you could do, and you did it yourself. I mean, I dreamt my whole life of climbing Fitz Roy because I worked at Patagonia, and Chenard and these guys, had opened my eyes to what was down there. And you see those mountains, and of course, as any kind of mountain person, you want to see them or climb them. And I dreamt of climbing Fitz Roy, and I was like, but I'll never do it. My first trip down there was the early days. The road was last year of the dirt road. We base camped up, at Bridwell Camp. We didn't have the luxuries of like an apartment in town where we were bouldering and sport. And we had horrible weather for 20 days. And the first time we got a window, it was 2 days, and we totally blew it because the wind came up, and I was like, I'm too scared, and I came down, and I just thought, God dang it, am I going to have to like hire a guide? Which, of course, I'm not going to do, because my good friend Rolo is always like, well, that's stupid. You should just do an adventure at your level. That's a proper adventure. If it's Guijame, it does, he did it at 15. Even if I do it at 40, that's still an adventure if that's at my like limit, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And it's like, that's where the media feeds are such a bummer, because it's so negative for people to think that you have to get the trophy climb to be satisfied, right? That's a whole other side. But like, eventually I work on my climbing and I get better, and I go back to Patagonia again with another woman friend who's, opened my eyes to a whole like other world of what I had the capacity to do. Like, I knew I could do it, but mentally I just didn't believe in myself, and I'd get scared. The weather would scare me. The thought of the route difficulty would scare me, whatever. Certainly down there, the weather. And she was just like, we got up at 2 a.m. It's snowing. And she's like, well, let's just go. Let's just walk toward our goal. We'll turn around. And I was like, I wouldn't have gotten out of the tent. I would have been like, well, in Alaska, you don't get out of the tent if it's snowing unless you absolutely have to. You just wait. And I was, we did. And we ended up doing this amazing climb that day together. And because it went bluebird. And we were sitting there between Cerro Torre and Fitz Roy on the backside, just like in this cathedral, and doing something I never thought was going to be possible.
Wow. And
so like I learned, and then I went back with another woman friend, and we climbed Fitz Roy, and we did it together, and we did it on our own. And in fact, I had more experience than her. She was a arguably stronger crack climber from Yosar and Yosemite days and stuff, and totally like was a great teammate, but was probably more scared than I was at that stage of launching on Fitz Roy, because that was her first trip down there. But I think, this just comes full circle to the mentorship thing, and just the idea of someone, how do we communicate or how do we mentor people into seeing like that going for the impossible has so many rewards, right? And even today, I'm sitting here saying this, and yet most of the time I'm still just doing the 3 days of fun climbing instead of putting myself, instead of really working toward my a goal that I actually might have, because I'm not a super goal oriented person because of that. I just look at the weather for the week and I'm like, well, this is what I'm going to do based on the weather, instead of this is my goal at the end of the season. How do I work toward that? And what do I need to give up to get there? And so for some of us, it's like micro steps, and we still get to have those epiphanies. And maybe for others, like I would say probably you or others who are a lot more focused on one aspect of climbing, and that's what you love and that's what you want to do. And, you might take those days and do V7s all day long, but you're probably more likely to set yourself a goal and know how to close some doors and know the value of that.
Right.
I'm still learning, and I still like too many aspects of the mountains, climbing.
Well, it is funny. I mean, like hearing you say that just now, like I still like too many aspects of the mountains. You're almost like rolling your eyes at yourself, making it sound like a bad thing. It's so interesting. Like everything that you're saying kind of touches on like a really deep philosophical question. And for me, I think it gets to the heart of like why I think climbing matters, I just don't understand why humans need to be challenged. Like, why is it that challenge feels so important as a part of the human experience versus like, it's 2023. It'd be so easy for many of us to just basically default to leisure most of the time and just have a life that's very comfortable and very enjoyable and fun. And yet for me, I do that for about a week and I start to go crazy, and I have to think about the next goal, and I have to challenge myself in some way, and I have to stretch my comfort zone, whether it's with the podcast and conversations or with climbing or both, or learning something new. And I mean, I think it makes sense just intuitively that that's like a key part of our evolution, but I don't understand why it feels so critically important to me. And to many of us.
Yeah.
It's really why climbing matters, because it's for us, like for many of us who are listening, who have our physical needs met, who have, we're lucky, we have jobs, we can put a roof over our heads, we can buy food whenever we want to. It's our avenue for challenge. It's our avenue for testing ourselves and for failing in a way that's still safe and doesn't threaten our survival.
Well, or it does, right?
Right, or it does.
I'd say as climbers, it threatens both those aspects way more than anything else people put themselves out doing, mostly. So, yeah, I mean, we have this luxury, right, where we're taking climbing and pushing ourselves, and there can be life-threatening aspects to that, to feel so alive and to get that joy and fulfillment. I mean, if you look at history, it's like people went to war, right?
Mm-hmm.
People fought on the battle lines. Like they didn't need to go climbing.
Right.
I mean, it's even today, you look at what people are going through in the Ukraine. I mean, here we are, we, like you said, we're just bored and unfulfilled if we sit around and just do the complacent cultural life, or culturally sort of imposed life that it looks like we're supposed to lead. I would say there are a lot of people who probably, because culture pushes us to think success is money, they put that risk into their professional life, maybe. And I think those of us born just maybe more as physical, athletic beings need to find a different place to put that. And the beauty of climbing is that it's both cognitive and physical, right? So that's
right.
Why I find it so interesting, because I like to push myself as well sometimes in my intellectual world or work world, but it's still not the same as, like, I still need that physical push, like you said, to feel really alive and put myself out there further. And the beauty of climbing is we can tie those together.
Mm-hmm.
But it is such a luxury because
of course, yeah.
So many people have that just in day-to-day living, or in our past we had other aspects of life that did that. But the why part is, I don't know. I mean, if you were an animal in the wild, you'd just be, the survival aspects of your being would be enough, right?
Right. Yes.
You'd have the fight and flight. You'd have all the stuff that goes with just finding food, as in winter, as or as a wildlife. And I think that's in us. I think there's an animalistic thing. I mean, we need, and we should, I think, be uncomfortable. And every time I have lots of family members or friends or other folks, or I don't judge them, but I almost feel for them, right? Because it's so easy, like you said, to just live in luxury and live not complacently, but just live comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
And they're always like, why do you need to keep doing this and do that? Why do you need to put yourself on that edge? And I don't even feel that I do that compared to all the people I know in climbing, right? I'm too afraid to fall still or whatever. I'll turn around sooner if the weather looks bad than some folks. But for me, my edge, I have to find that, or else I don't feel very alive. I don't feel very much like life is very interesting if I don't find that in something. And it can be intellectual at times. It doesn't always have to be our physical being, but I just think culturally we're dumbed down, and I think people aren't awake because of it. I mean, mostly I love the climbing culture because I feel like most of my climbing friends are more awake in the world than a lot of other folks.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because I've been sitting here wondering, why is it important? Why does it matter? I'm just kind of reflecting for myself, and you saying that it makes you feel alive, that challenge, the risk. Is that the difference you see? Like, you feel that aliveness in yourself, you see it in your climbing partners, and you talked about your woman friends who like to top rope and are just content to top rope all the time. Do you see a difference there? Like, do you feel this aliveness that you want to be able to give to them, or are they finding that challenge in other parts of their lives?
So a couple of things. I think they certainly could be finding it in other parts of their lives. I could think about that and give examples, but it's totally my judgment call on them to want them to experience what I finally found, right? And the joy of that, of finding that confidence and overcoming kind of that questioning of my abilities. Shoot, I had a train of thought there that I kind of lost because we went off.
Yeah.
Oh, so a question. Here's a really interesting one. If you're not a skier, right?
I grew up skiing, actually. Yeah, I skied for most of my childhood downhill and telemarking.
So we could draw a similar analogy in climbing, but one of the things, as this group that I've ski toured with forever, we ask ourselves sometimes on these trips is, if there was no risk of avalanches, would backcountry skiing be as fulfilling? Okay. And I would say arguably, and I have a different answer today than I used to, yes, but we would then be pushing ourselves into steeper and steeper, more dangerous terrain. Like many of us who are finding the fulfillment in the whole package, right? Like that last week, we couldn't push into really steep terrain, or some of the tours we love to do out of that hut, because there were some persistent weak layers, and people were really worried about avalanches. And so I dug a ton of pits, and I did a lot of snow analysis and just tried to learn from it. And as much as I love to ski powder, that whole package is still part of the experience of a backcountry ski trip. Like, that's what makes it, I think, fulfilling, and fun and interesting, and where we're learning, right? I think the bigger thing I would distill it all down to is learning. Like, if we're not learning, are we really happy? I think culturally we're told we should be, if we own a bunch of junk and we sit around with all these material things, and we're supposed to be like, oh, now I've arrived, we're really happy. But we only learn if we push ourselves past the comfort zone, if we're only over the edge a bit, or at least on the edge, otherwise You're really not. I don't know. I don't think I'm learning. if I'm always comfortable in any way, intellectually, spiritually, physically. So I think that's it. Like, and maybe just those of us who've had it want more of it. It's like a drug. Maybe those who, who were pushed into it, unfortunately, through cancers and other things, right? Come out going, whoa, like, I got to reevaluate. Life is, you only get one life. And It's maybe not that long. So what do I want to do with it, right?
Yeah.
And some people turn toward just like the fun factor and the bucket list. That's all just fun. But arguably, even then, people are still going to places where they're learning something, they're experiencing something, their eyes are open to something new, right? Maybe just because we're more physical, that's why climbing is so special, that we get the cognitive and the physical and on that edge, and it's so amazing.
Yeah,
it's hard to take ourselves to where the very edge we could, but
yeah, I think you really hit on it. I think I don't know if this is like a global human truth, or if it's just something that I resonate with personally, but I think it is growth. I think it's learning and growth and engaging with like the edge of your comfort zone. Like hearing you describe the skiing experience, I skied for 15 years or something, a lot, but it was all resort skiing. So in college, I start to get into backcountry, and I'm telemarking, and telemarking's hard. And I had no interest in dancing with the risk of avalanches, because just hiking up the mountain was so uncomfortable, and doing all the lunges, telemarking coming down was so uncomfortable. So that was plenty of growth opportunity for me, just the experience of being out in the mountains. I'm sure I'm so much less fit and less comfortable in the mountains than you are. So that stretched me, and then the added thought of like, ooh, this hillside could slide down. I had no interest in engaging with that. I just wanted to do safe stuff because everything else was hard about it. But I think that is the theme. Like in climbing, as soon as your comfort, or in anything, as soon as your comfort zone grows, it just feels so rewarding to engage with some edge of our comfort zone, and we can kind of expand out in different directions, whether it's climbing more scary stuff, or whether it's climbing just more difficult stuff, or switching styles and becoming a beginner again, and having the discomfort of not knowing, not having that confidence that comes with experience. But yeah, I think you touched on it really well there. I think it is learning and growth and engaging with the edge of our comfort zone that's so fulfilling for me.
Yeah. I mean, that said, I'll give you two other sort of things I think about. One is just a reflection of something funny growing up in a big family. But my mom is always saying, when are you going to stop climbing? And I mean, to this day, it's just like, if she could, she'd still be saying, when are you going to settle down and have a family, or work in an orphanage, or, that's just her Catholic world, right? In terms of the value of life. And I can't get through to her that, that her taking the risk to have 11 kids. Like, my dad was out of work twice.
Totally.
She was like, just drive a bus, just get a job. And he's like, no, I'm going to get a good job. I mean, they're raising 11 kids, trying to put food on the table.
Right.
My older sisters sewed their own clothes, and it's no big. I'm not trying to play some violin. Like, I grew up the youngest, so I was totally like in a good situation, but reasonable, regular, middle class America, but like, she took that risk in her own way, right?
Exactly.
I mean, she was always on that edge. My God. I mean, it was just like little postpartum depression. I mean, all the stuff that goes into that, but she can't totally relate. She doesn't see, because for her, raising children is something you do that's important in the world. And hopefully they grow up Catholic, which most of us aren't, but it's hard to see climbing, as we all like to say, it's so selfish, but it's not really. It's just like we're all given different gifts, right? And kind of that's where we're at. Now, the flip side of that is, if you study meditation and Buddhism, and I'm, my partner happens to be very into it, and I'm trying really hard to meditate a little bit every day so that I can not get attached to things and slow myself down. But I mean, ideally, like, we could have all these same experiences sitting on a cushion.
Right.
If you really, the Buddhists would tell you, right? So us sitting here with the luxury of this conversation, of which, how fulfilling projects are and pushing ourselves over that edge and putting ourselves out there, you know, that might encourage people who aren't doing it, and they might find something new in that for themselves and more confidence. And like what I'm trying to get at with broad beta for women and genderqueer folks, those of us on the margins who followed culture and kind of wanting us to break out of that, is just like, what is your true nature, right? And part of the struggle for me, growing up with the guilt of Catholicism and everything else that is put on me from my family, from my parents, is like, I'm a physical person. Like I definitely love the challenges of work and intellectual side of things, and finding meditation and some, you know, the spiritual aspects I gain from, or just the joy in being in wilderness and wildness. But my nature is to be physical. Like it's just part of who I am. And I've beat myself up about it my whole life. Like I should be someone other than who I am.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, that's partly cultural. It's partly familial. Maybe just eventually self-imposed. But it's so stupid, right? It's like such a waste of energy instead of just being like, no, this is my gift. Like I can either use it or just trash myself about it forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder because it's not something I feel like gives other people something in the end. You know, like doctors get to, you know, my niece is a doctor though, and she's like, I don't save people. I just get the same druggies who come into the ER asking for Dilaudid every day. Like, I'm not helping society, you know, I'm just handing out drugs or whatever and patching someone up. And I'm like, wow, that was such an epiphany to me. I was like, here I think of these professions that actually help the world, and someone in them is just as challenged or, you know, perplexed or just like frustrated at their own life that they're not doing enough. And I thought, well, you know, when are we all going to stop doing that to each other? It's I think it's very cultural, and it's also the state of the world. Like things are happening with climate change where we all hopefully are awake enough to like kind of want to positively affect that, or, you know, mitigate our impact. And so it's hard not to want to feel like that what we're doing is giving back somehow. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I think if we're joyful, I mean, even the Dalai Lama would say that, like, if you're joyful, if you're happy, you know, that emanates out to the world. And so my cynical self is like, okay, stop being cynical and critical. Stop even being such a Debbie Downer about the planet, right? Because I can get really heavy with that. And share the joy of what you love and experience in the physical aspects of climbing and what I do in the mountains.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the broad beta aspect to me, is how can I share that in all my years in the industry? You know, how can I try to share that and help others experience it who want to, you know, who dabbled in it already.
Yeah, so that's where I wanted to go next. I definitely want to talk about broad beta in a lot more depth in a second here. I'm just going to share a few thoughts that came to mind while you were talking just now. The first one is, for people listening, I don't want to come off as putting climbing on a pedestal as like the best way, or you know, some like amazing way to challenge yourselves. It's exactly what you said. Like, your mother found that kind of challenge just by raising 11 kids that were constantly growing and changing and evolving. And I mean, that's a level of challenge that feels so scary and intimidating to me. Everyone, I think, finds that in their own life and in their own way. And, you know, for like a marginalized person listening to this, it could be, they could get a lot more of that challenge and growth just from survival, you know, unfortunately, just based on where things are at in our society still. So I'm not putting climbing on a pedestal. At the same time, or I'm not saying that like people, you know, need to try certain types of climbing to find that sort of fulfillment and growth. But at the same time, you know, you just said like, there's this common feeling that climbing is selfish, and because you're not giving back, but then you compare it to your doctor friend, and that was a big shift for me that happened maybe in my mid or late 20s, because I was really wrestling with that question for a long time. Like, am I just self-serving? Like, you know, is this doing anything positive in the world? And I think if you love something that is that space where you can engage with challenge and growth, and you are someone that wants to make positive change, you'll find a way to do it indirectly. You know, like you would not be doing broad beta if it wasn't for the experiences that you've had in the mountains and the partnerships that you've had and how those have shaped you. And now you want to give that to other people. That's amazing. And you're also sharing your appreciation and love of the environment and of the planet that we get to inhabit and sharing that value with other people. And of course, that's going to have a positive impact on global warming, you know? So it's not direct. You're not like out there campaigning and engaging in politics and directly planting trees maybe and things like that. But I think if climbing is the thing that helps you come alive and challenges you and gets you thinking about how to give back, then it's not selfish at all. I think it's an amazing vehicle for that. And you're a great example of that with what you're doing. So,
well, I mean, I definitely agree with you that, and my partner's been great about that because I definitely grew up with a different attitude. But, you know, yeah, pursuing our passion and if that's climbing, finding that joy and sharing it with others, that's a good thing. And barring travel, our sport is pretty low impact, right?
Right.
Our passion, which is also super. It's a nice aspect to it. I will say, like with broad beta, you touched on, you know, the wilderness aspect, the environmental aspect, the planet, where it's, you know, that passion of wanting to us all to realize what we have right now is ephemeral. Like it could go away, you know. And I mean, I just watched. Sometimes I'll pull up and watch a little climbing film. This one was about a remote place in BC, and they only access these big walls because of the logging roads, right? So it's this juxtaposition of the craziness that this whole thing that's destroying the very area that they've found that they so love is the only reason they've found it, and the only reason they can continue to climb there is because the logging roads are maintained.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things with broad beta that I struggle a little bit with is trying to encourage women's partnerships, because I think that's, if you are a climber and a woman or genderqueer person, finding those folks who are at your level to go out and experience climbs with is so different than being with someone who's a guide or a mentor or someone better, right? Sometimes you just need to get in the weeds and figure it out on your own, and it pushes you to take the responsibility. And there's something so amazingly fulfilling about that. But also it's that connection to wildness inside us and finding our true nature and living out who, you know, the gifts we have and the passions we have in the way that we want to, rather than how we're imposed on, you know, what's imposed on us by our culture. So it's really important to me to figure out how to tell these stories, how to share these stories through climbing and skiing, but the connection with wildness and our environment and how fragile it is and how important it is, and like how much that gives us in addition to the physical. And the challenge there is, you know, we've got some great stories of sport climbing mentorship coming up and things that are a little more project based, and those bring other epiphanies and like revelations, I think, to our community of broad beta that are really important. But the big picture for me is just that the wildness aspect needs to be there in it, and how to share that, you know, even if you just go out Nordic skiing or you go out a day cragging versus being in the gym, what does that feel like? You know, for me to be out in the canyon cragging or projecting something, it's radically different than being in the gym. You know, the gym to me is training, could be kind of social, but being outside, you know, I get home from a day outside, no matter what the weather or what's going on, it's just like I'm fueled differently. That connection is super important. And I don't know, maybe there were gifts of friends who gave me that in my experiences. I was fortunate, but gosh, it's like, it's a huge part of what makes us the people, you know, alive and human and compassionate and fulfilled. And I think in our world today of Strava and timing everything and you know, projecting and numbers and accomplishments and all the feeds we get on social media that I don't get because I'm not on social media. It's really dangerous. Like, it's great information and inspiration. And that's what I struggle with in terms of broad beta. It's like I miss out on a lot of inspiration and ideas because I don't follow social media. that's why I'm doing this as well, because it's like a chance for people who want to come to us. You don't have to come to us. If you want to come to us, these stories are here, and we have a podcast and we have a written story, but we're not feeding it to you daily in a way that programs your brain to think, oh my God, I'm not worthy. I'm not doing enough. I'm not sending enough. I'm not
Yeah, that's great.
Projecting enough. You know what I mean? It's like, you shouldn't feel bad going out for a day of B7, but you should also feel like hopefully something inside you says, no, right now I want to close the doors and work on B12. And this is what I need to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Not because you're fed this stuff that says that's what's going to make you worthy or sponsored or famous. I mean, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I don't know. That's where getting out in wilderness and away from all that stuff, I think, just makes us all better human beings.
Yeah. I love it. I love your vision for it. I want to take a few steps back and hear more about what broad beta is. And I have this question for you. So Leslie, we already talked about Leslie, our mutual, your close friend and my acquaintance from college who connected us. You started broad beta together, and she said that this is an idea that you were sitting on for like 6 years. And then she kind of gave you the nudge to finally make it happen. What was that idea? What was it that you were noticing in the world around you? What did you hope to do with broad beta?
Yeah, I mean, to go back, I started working in the outdoor industry, selling skis and climbing stuff when I was 15, and worked all through college. And then flew out to Patagonia, Ventura, California, to do an interview on my own dime, and got a job there, right? And it changed my life. Like, there were women running that place. It was a very progressive thinking California company that I came from a conservative Midwest background. Anyway, through years of working in the industry, eventually running product lines and creating them for them, and then developing a lot of women's and men's product for skiing and climbing and endurance, mountain, fast and light stuff. For years, I'd done that in the industry, and I'd held these focus groups with our ambassadors wherever I worked. And when I would fill them in on the new fabrics and the new products, and then we'd brainstorm ideas, right? Like, what's missing? What are the problems out there? What can we solve? And when I go through the fabric stuff, the women especially would be like, why don't we know any of this? You know what? You should do a gear review site for women. That's kind of where it started. And then my friend Jewel and I were brainstorming on an ice climbing trip. Like, we should come up with a name for this. And she actually cleverly coined the broad beta name. And I was like, dang. And so I paid for the domain, and I kept paying more than I should have. I didn't even know to sit on that thing. I finally let it go. And then, of course, Leslie and I are out one day ski touring after climbing the nose and stuff together. And we were talking, and I was explaining it. And then she was like, we should do this, like, but like, we should talk about partnerships, because we'd just gone through a couple of big climbs together, and the value of that partnership as women was so valuable to us, that experience, that it was like, God, it'd be so inspiring to read about other women doing this. And when you look at it, it's like, there's lots of great new groups that are supporting beginners. I teach ice climbing at the ice clinics, and there's Splash Boxy, and there's She Jumps, and all these great companies that are getting women out and folks on the margins out in ways that are just so supportive. And then there's sponsored athletes and social media and companies making films about sponsored athletes and ambassadors. And they have their platform, right, to tell their stories. And they're even paid to tell their stories. But then I look around and I'm like, whoa, there's so many women. And now for me, opening the doors to all these others on the margins, their stories aren't being told. We're not hearing their stories. And they're so incredibly valuable, and enriching and inspiring, and maybe just tragic and sad. And that was when it was like, boom, the light went off. It's like, this could be our chance to share those stories. And in addition, for me, it's easy to do the gear review. So the gear review becomes part of broad beta. And I talk about fabrics and products that are made, quote unquote, made for women. And eventually we'll get to this whole like gender fluid aspect of how we make products, which is really a good challenge for me to think about. And we're doing tech tips. And of course, food as women in mountain sports is so inherent in who we are, and our eating, and our focus on our body and physical aspects. So that's a part of it that we've included as well. But yeah, I think it's just wanting to hear other stories. I want to hear these stories, and we've already had so many, and they involve the whole life of that person. I think going back to something you touched on earlier, it's just like how we heroize people. Americans love heroes, right? And on the mentorship side, I learned early on the heroes that I saw people gravitating toward, they were able to separate the rest of their lives from what they did physically. So the climbers that came out as heroes when I was younger, if I knew them, which in our industry you did, right? I knew the other aspects of their life. And I was like, wow, this person's not a hero to me. They're a brilliant climber, super inspiring climber. But like for me, and maybe this is more inherent for women, I don't know this for sure, but I think we look at more of the whole person before they become a hero to us. Like Muhammad Ali is my hero. Brilliant athlete, stood up for, went to prison during the prime of his career, right? Now he could have not done that and signed up, and they probably still might have let him just be the boxer that he was. But
right.
For me, it's the whole person. And so I love, like in our stories, we weave like what else is going on in their lives. The women's stories or the genderqueer stories we're telling. And it's so interesting because then it brings in all these things you and I've just been talking about for over an hour.
Right.
The challenges in our lives that come into play. It's like we don't get to separate them all out from who we are as a climber or our projecting or goals. It's like it's all there, sitting there somewhere. And so we're trying to bring some of that out so that other women who've maybe never gone for something or never had a woman partnership or just an equal partnership in the mountains, they see someone's life and they're like, well, that person's not a superhero. Like mentors are mentors because they're there with you personally. So you get to know them and you know that they're better than you at something and they're showing you something, but you're there with you. But like a hero or someone who inspires you, that's such a step removed, right? You're only seeing a partial person.
Right. Right.
And we can get inspired by something someone's done, but like Marc-Andre Leclerc, Leclerc, I mean, he did what he did because he had to do it. It's who he was. It's what he was, where he found himself and joy in the world, and we can heroize him, we can villainize him, we can do all these things. But for me, like that guy found his true nature and he lived it. And that's hard as a soloist because you affect other people when you die, and it's a very risky thing to be doing. Classically, he didn't die soloing. But anyway, yeah, that was our idea. It was just like, goes from this idea of a gear review site to women's partnerships to sharing stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
I love that.
All that goes with it, from the tragic to the comic to the success to the failure. Just trying to bring up those stories and inspire us, or just enlighten us, I guess.
Well, yeah, I love it. I mean, I obviously really relate to it because I really try to do that here. And, oftentimes I am talking to people who either were or are my heroes. But that's why it's always interesting to me to try to talk about things outside of simply climbing and really get to know this person as a person and help to humanize them, because it's never been easier to feel disconnected from who people really are. We see the curated highlight reel all the time, and maybe that's changing. I mean, a lot of people are leading with more vulnerability, and I think culturally we're kind of shifting in that direction because, I don't know, the little dopamine snacks get kind of tiresome after a while. We want substance. But anyway, all that to say, I have my own lane, you have your lane, and I just love what you're doing and the stories that you're sharing. This is probably going to seem like a really basic question, given everything that you've just said, but I'm still going to ask it. I'm curious, why is it so important to you to share those stories? What do they do for you? What do you see them do for other women who are engaging with broad beta? Why are sharing these stories that go beyond just the climbing and show this whole person, why are they so powerful?
They're powerful to me because I think that in my life, as strong as I was in my competing and being an athlete, I never saw the potential, or I was never given like this vision of what was possible. I always looked at the people out there and I was like, well, I can't do that. Lynn Hill does that. Well, yeah, she was a gymnast. She's like done this her whole life. I mean, I was impressed, undoubtedly, right? Superhero powers. But that was what it was to me. It was like superhero powers. Like and maybe this is just personal, but I always looked at them as like, that's out of my range. They have a gift I don't have. They have something special, right? And Americans are classic for this. Like we tell kids all the time, you're so special, Johnny, and it's like,
you can do anything.
Yeah. And it's such a, God, there's so much in that is negative. The positive is definitely you want to inspire kids to think they can do the impossible. I mean, that's what this is all about, right? It's like, so there's a part of that specialness that's really just trying to say to them, you can do anything. But we're not special. Like the better part of that is maybe it's just semantics, but it's like, no, we're all capable of this. Like there's a certain level where you're gifted and we're not all going to be Phelps. We're not all going to be Usain Bolt. We're not Alex Honnold. I mean, but there's a lot of places we could get to if we didn't see that as something we don't have. And so I never read those stories. I always read the stories of the classic white guy, but climbers at the time, who were doing this stuff. And it just was like, well, that's not going to be me, or even friends in the industry. I mean, I worked with tons of ambassadors, like who were incredible, but I just always thought, well, that's them. I can't get there, which is so funny as someone sort of physically capable. I mean, I don't know why I couldn't see that was a possibility for me.
Yeah.
But I know that mentally I had that block. I just didn't. So like it became like, oh, they were either heroes or whatever. They were just people I was, sort of in admiration of, in awe of, but I never thought I was capable of something similar. And I think that's where today's social media is beneficial, right? It gives everybody, in some ways, this idea that, no, whoa, I could go do that. Like I could be that. And so that's great. But sometimes the feed is, like you said, it's a soundbite. And so what we're trying to do is, like, this is the whole life story. This is a normal person doing something extraordinary. And I'll correlate this back to the early days of Patagonia's catalog. The brilliance of that catalog was ordinary people sending in their adventures, their photos, stories. I wrote some stories in there too, and they were nothing crazy. But that, like the days of that, they're gone. Everything's an ambassador story. Everything's contrived. Everything's a PR stint. Everything's put together. That's like the raw, untold journeys of ordinary people doing these crazy, extraordinary things. They aren't out there. They aren't as accessible. And that's just what I want to share because I want to read them selfishly.
I love it. I love it. That's so awesome. I mean, you're really normalizing ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And it's funny, it just reminds me of like how powerful it is. What am I trying to say here? Like a lesson that I've been reflecting on and is so clear to me in climbing is, the culture, the people around you when you start climbing absolutely have so much power in shaping your paradigm. Like for me, I grew up, I started climbing at Western Washington University when I was in college, and the strongest climbers in this little gym that we had climbed like V8 and like 5'11 plus. And I just thought 5'11 was like insanely hard, And I'm sure that still holds me back to some degree. I mean, I've gotten past that to a great extent, but it's so different from today where 5'14 just doesn't even seem like a big deal to kids. They're like, it's like a blip on the radar, like doing their first 14A. It's just like, oh yeah, cool, did that, benchmark, whatever, milestone. But it doesn't feel big and intimidating and crazy and it's only other people that do stuff like that, the way it still does to me to some extent. And I think it was Steve Bechtel that said this quote, and I still think about it all the time, and it really helped shift this whole thing on its head. Taking this idea of like, it's special people that do these extraordinary things and flipping it around and saying like, what makes you so special that you can't do that? What makes you so special that you can't climb 514? And it's like, damn, really puts me in the driver's seat, It's awesome. It's a really powerful reframe, and one that I'm still working on and thinking about all the time.
The information and the inspiration is out there now with social media. So, and people are crushing it at every level. Like, we have no excuses anymore. So yeah, you can find that inspiration and hopefully see that it's possible for you too. So in one sense, that isn't as novel as it was, from in my time. But I think what is more novel, because social media is more of a soundbite and always shows the best side of people for the most part, maybe it is shifting, which is great to hear, is the whole story. And I think that's what we're trying to bring, because I want the whole person's story, right? Especially as a woman, that's where I get inspired. I mean, the menopause article for me, it's like, I wrote that as sort of a catharsis, because I was just like going batshit crazy when I went through everything. And you don't get a lot of information because no one shares that part of their lives. Like,
right.
Women I knew who were still crushing after clearly they were in their 50s. I didn't know what they went through during that time. Was it good or bad? Did it help or hurt? I mean, and as a woman, some of that is so helpful to understand, even if it's just to prepare yourself. So, I mean, let's face it, we're just more complex hormonally. So it makes us more complex human beings with a lot more emotional stuff than most men might go through. And I think as, women, especially getting after it in the mountains or just having these wild adventures, sharing their whole life's trajectory and story and complexities, and, whether that's eating stuff or like they want to get pregnant, but they love climbing and they're not sure they want a kid. I mean, all those things, like you don't have to really totally think about all that, right? And yeah, okay, we can all climb 514 if we put our heads to it. Most people could today. Young people are doing it like a drop of a bucket, when they're like 10 in the gym. But
yeah,
I just think there's a whole complex kind of array of things as in life that just I would love to portray in our stories if we can.
Right.
So it's not just hero stories. It's not just grades. It's not just pushing yourself, right? It's the whole mountain life, like, trajectory.
Right. And I don't mean to make those things sound trivial or easy or simple at all. It's just that, like, that was a big lesson that I needed to learn and still need to learn and remind myself of all the time. But they're extraordinary. Like, these stories that you're sharing, these people are doing extraordinary things. They're not normal things. They're not easy things. They're extraordinary, but they're also ordinary people.
But like you said, they're not. Yeah. And we have to be careful even with that language, right? Because it goes back to feeling like, oh, it's extraordinary. I'm not extraordinary.
Right.
But like what you're saying is like, no, I'm extraordinary. Like,
I can be. It's just going to take a lot of hard work. It's not easy, but like, what makes me so special that I can't be that? Huh. Okay. I don't know. Let's really break that down.
I also, we're doing this just because there aren't many venues of out there right now, other than social media, for women to share these journeys, right? To for us all to look up and to them and read their stories and listen to the interviews. I mean, you've done some brilliant interviews of women, and it's awesome. Like, you've brought out the whole person, and it's really inspiring. And it's you've got your focus, and ours is a little broader. So it's just, it's just another platform, really. I mean, in the old days, it would have been a magazine. And, still to this day, like, I don't know, the magazines are so media driven now. This, like, most of them are useless to me in our industry because it's all just about selling product. There's some good articles in there occasionally, but like this, we're not out to make a bunch of money. We're just, it really is my chance to, to try to give something back, or even create something I was never able to create in the industry while I was developing product. I mean, I developed a ton of women's product. Most of it got dropped because we could never sell enough, right? And, it was really technical. And it's like, I'm cracking up because I look online and I see this company making zippered crotches in women's pants, and they've patented it. And I was like, I still get roasted for being the woman who developed the Superfly or the Bombay zipper in alpine climbing package for women at Patagonia, because, we never sold enough to, like, we've lost money on the whole project.
Oh man.
And I still sew zippers into all my alpine climbing stuff, right? It turns out it works, so I mean, there's definitely, we've evolved, but I still feel in the outdoor world, in our world in general, I mean, just there's a lot of room for progress with what women can bring to the world, and we need to change the system. We're set up, everything's catered to how men operate, and we've always tried to just fit in, right?
Yeah.
And we are always ending up being a man in a woman's clothing. Like if we run a corporation, or if we run the Alpine Club, or it's like, because the system is locked in. It's like, we don't get to change that system. And I kudos to Patagonia. That's where I learned a lot of this, because, Chenard didn't give a flying F about what anyone thought. And it was clear to him. It's like, well, we need a day, or Melinda, it's like, we need a daycare. And we need flex schedules, and we need healthy organic food, and we, things that still don't
that's awesome
today in a lot of companies, And so once I feel like once women are able to, I don't know, maybe it's just a force of numbers when we finally stand up like the women's movement and we say it's enough is enough. Like, we have to change the way things work, from politics to the business world to how we develop product. And that's the bigger vision, right? But who knows?
I love it. Well, that's a great question. What is your vision for Broad Beta? I mean, I know you have a pretty sizable team. Is this something that is your career right now, or that you're hoping becomes your career? And what is your larger vision for it?
Yeah. Career. I don't even like using that word. I mean, I guess I've had a career because I've done something that has evolved in the similar, industry my whole life, right? Developing product in the outdoor industry. So I've been really fortunate. I've been able to work in a field that's my passion, and I loved it forever.
Is Broad Beta your job? I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So no, exactly. So COVID hit, whatever. I was in a space where I could start this. So right now it's my full-time thing.
Okay.
Awesome. I say full-time knowing that what we just talked about earlier is that I'm obviously outside a lot.
A climber's full-time. Yeah.
If I did it full-time, it would probably progress a lot faster. Yeah. I hope to monetize this just enough to really, like, have the momentum keep going the way I feel like it's starting. So every time someone gets introduced, we just did a live broadcast event, we call them, at the Ice Festival here in Bozeman, and we had 6 women speak, and there's so much there I could share with you. It was so impactful. I mean, just such different walks of life that spoke there, and 100 other women and genderqueer folks, and it was really powerful, And I know there's something here. Like, I know there's everyone who kind of finds us is like, whoa, this is really needed. Like, really enjoy this, but we're competing online with 1 billion different hits that people get to look at stuff. And so and I'm a Luddite. I don't even, the last thing I should be starting is a virtual business, right? An online internet business. But I don't think of it as a business. It's just a community. And eventually we're going to make it even more interactive, and folks can share their ideas of gear reviews or their feedback on a piece of gear, so that goes out as testimonials to other women, and we can all kind of have that information. So yeah, I would love it to just support me and all the women who are so excited, and all those who are volunteering, and some of those who we need to pay more, just to help it grow, just to keep it going. It's like the internet. I mean, it doesn't come for free. Like,
right.
None of these things on the internet that are free. I mean, somebody's paying, whether it's ads and companies giving you ads or whatever. So, as you mentioned to me, and you were an inspiration, saying, you stuck with the podcast thing. Took you a couple of years, and you gave up an engineering career to to do this, but you were so inspired, and you're living in a van, so you're maybe not a millionaire off it, but you're making a living and you really love doing it. And that's a great inspiration for Leslie and I. That was so wonderful to hear, because it's like, no, let's stick with this. And I'm in a position in life I can, but I can't forever do it, without monetizing it. For every one of us who are making it happen.
Yeah.
So my hope that we would do this. It's my hope that it could lead to collaboration on product with some companies.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
That's my main passion, is seeing that, fabrics and products and for women and what's needed. And I still see so many opportunities, even though there's so much more developed these days, but there's still openings for stuff to be done better. And so I would love us to be able to have all this information from our community, share it with a company who really cares to make stuff that works for women climbers and skiers in a better way, and collaborate on that.
Awesome. I love it. Where can people find Broad Beta, and how can they support Broad Beta if they have the means to?
Yeah, thanks. Broadbeta.com. If you go sign up for our newsletter, we only send it out a couple times a month, but then you'll know when the new stories are there and the new podcasts. You can get our podcast, Broad Beta Podcast, anywhere you can find your other podcasts. Broad.beta is our Instagram handle. And so, just getting on our newsletter and on our Instagram helps us tremendously to know who's out there and share the word, and then for me to hopefully share with these companies the value of this and get them involved, which will only help all of us, because I think there's so much there we can do together. Same with sharing with all the other groups that are doing things for women and genderqueer folks right now. There's so many good ones, organizations that we're looking to share their information, and likewise. So yeah, and then anyone who wants to volunteer or write stories, just email us, broadbeta@gmail.com. If you have a story to tell, we'd be so excited to share it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Ideas for our gear reviews. And I mean, we want your stories, or we'd love to interview you if you don't like to write.
Very cool. Very cool. I will link to all the things Broad Beta in the show notes for this episode. Jeannie, we just knocked out more than 90 minutes. We just did like an hour and 45. How you doing? Okay, we'll wrap up. We'll wrap up. I want to.
You have a really pending, crazy question you just didn't get answered. I'd say that. I really enjoyed our conversation. But
me
might
too.
Be enough for our viewers.
Me too. I want to tie up a couple quick loose ends. I'll keep it quick and we'll wrap up here. You touched on the menopause thing. For people that want to hear more about that, Jeannie wrote a great article about her experience going through menopause. There's a line in there that I thought was so brilliant. It just says, menopause is hell. It also made me a better climber. So if that doesn't entice you, I don't know what would. But yeah, we don't have time to get into it here, but I will link to that article that she wrote for Outside Magazine in the show notes as well.
It's also on Climbing Online.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll find it. I started this conversation by asking you what chapter in your life you're at now. What do you think the next chapter of your life will be? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No. I'm such a planner. I'm a huge planner, right?
Yeah.
And I don't even want to think about it, because I let the climate change and all these things weigh too heavily on me. Even now, the weight of wanting to help do so much more with Broad Beta, with trans folks and genderqueer folks and indigenous folks and those on the margins who've been, I think as a woman, we've been on the margins. And then I realized, oh my God, I've had it so good, even as a woman, and all the challenges I have versus the men I grew up with. It's nothing, right, compared to them. So there's just so much to be done. And I think the main thing I'm trying to do in my life is just be present where I am and take the next step. So yeah, I'm trying hard not to think too much.
All right.
That next phase.
Yeah.
I hope, like you said, I'm climbing and enjoying life in the mountains well into my 70s or 80s.
Oh, I'm sure you will be. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great answer. I love to end with this question. This is my last one, I promise. What is something that you wish people spent more time thinking about? As a way of kind of just closing our conversation, does anything come to top of mind for you?
How to see the world through someone else's lens.
Love that.
Because until we do that, we'll never have compassion and empathy and want to feel like we're equal to every living thing. And that it has as much value. You know, the old growth trees in BC and the people in Ukraine or Russia or trans folks. Yeah.
Right.
It's just pretty hard to do, but awakens something in all of us that's important, I think.
Yeah. Well, I love that. That hits right close to home. I think you're already helping us all do that by sharing the stories that you're sharing. And hopefully you and I are helping do that right now, helping people look through your lens a little bit. People that don't know you and have gotten to know you through this conversation. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Jeannie. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've really loved it. And I know you're not someone who sits still for 2 hours very often. So, so thank you. Thanks for giving me so much of your time.
I mean, the best thing about Broad Beta is it's led me to meet people like you and learn what you're doing and get inspired, you know, by all of what you've brought to the climbing world or the world at large. It's awesome. So I really appreciate being on your show and appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for saying that. I appreciate you being here. It's an honor to have you on. I'm excited to see how this thing continues to grow and what you build. And for everyone listening, once again, I will link to all things Broad Beta in the show notes at thenuggetclimbing.com. For this episode, you can find all of the links right there in your podcast app. And until next time, thanks again for listening.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. Sing 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.